Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you're joining us. My name is Chris Shung. I'm a retired police chief, former undersheriff, and one of the founding board members of The Curve. We are really excited to have you all join us here today. You obviously know our founder, Simon Sinek, and the work that he's done. We have a real special guest today, Will Guidara. It's just going to be a time where Simon and Will are just going to chat organically about just the incredible world of hospitality. And you might not think hospitality and the world of policing has a lot to do with each other, but our hope is after this 90 minutes that you're really going to kind of walk away with, wow, these are some huge takeaways that we can do in our industry. Before we get any further, though, I do want to introduce some of the other panelists who are our founding board members, as well as our executive director. I'm going to turn it over to Pat and Doug to just briefly introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pat Burgess. I am a retired medical device executive and the current executive director of The Curve. Really thrilled to have everyone here for our second installment of this learning opportunity, and we expect to have more in the future. So thanks for joining. I hope you enjoy the session.
And Derek.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Derek Miller. I'm the chief of police in Irving, Texas. I'm very excited about today, and that's it. Welcome.
All right, and Doug.
Hello to wherever you happen to be in the world. Very excited to have you here today. Doug Shoemaker, third vice president of the International Association of Chiefs of Police and founding board member of The Curve, and beyond thrilled to have this conversation coming up between two great minds, and hope you'll be just as thrilled too. So thanks for joining.
Thanks, Doug. And for those of you who may not have heard, we do have a LinkedIn site. I think many of you probably found us through that way. So I hope you all follow us on The Curve on LinkedIn, as well as thecurve.org is our website. And we do want to make it known that if you ever have any questions, if there's anything that we can do to help you, your agency, and your growth, we're always open to ideas, requests. We'll put our contact info in the chat briefly in a little bit. But today, without further ado, I do want to kind of do a quick bio on the two guests that we have having the conversation today. You all know Simon Sinek. He's a globally recognized author, motivational speaker, and organizational consultant known for his groundbreaking ideas on leadership and motivation. You're probably very familiar with his books, Starts With Why, Leaders Eat Last, and The Infinite Game. Most importantly, Simon is our founder, who, with his heart and soul, kind of set us on this journey and really brought many of us together on how we can take a look at policing and the culture of policing and how leadership wraps into all of that. And today we have a very special guest. Will Guidara is a renowned restaurateur and hospitality expert, celebrated for his innovative approach to the dining experience. As the former co-owner of 11 Madison Park, Will led the restaurant to multiple accolades, including being named the world's best restaurant in 2017. He's the co-founder of the Welcome Conference, a pioneering forum focused on hospitality and service excellence, and his dedication to creating memorable and meaningful guest experiences has made him a thought leader in the industry. He continues to inspire hospitality professionals worldwide through his speaking engagements and publications. His most recent book, which is highly recommended, I was just talking to a police chief about this, and he said it was one of the best ones he's ever read, Unreasonable Hospitality, the remarkable power of giving people more than they expect, was published in 2022 and has made a huge impact on how all the industries view customer service. So without further ado, I want to hand it over to Simon, and the two of you can just have an incredible conversation that we're going to be privileged to be a part of.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Will, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. One of the reasons I wanted to bring you on here is because you reinvented a restaurant, became the best restaurant in the world, not by reinventing the food, which is what you'd expect, but by reinventing the way service was done. And so I'm sure what everybody's thinking as they're logging on or as they're watching, which is, why would I bring a hospitality expert and restaurateur to talk to police? And the reason is very simple. I want to tell you the reason why I invited you, and then we'll go on, which is like the restaurant, there's certain things that you have to do and you have to do well. The food has to be delivered, it has to be the right order, it has to be warm when it shows up, and there's sort of the function of a restaurant. But then there's other things that are not sort of the function of a restaurant, right? Which is how we interact with people. And policing is very much the same. There's the function of policing. Sometimes there's law enforcement, sometimes they're therapists, sometimes they're dealing with domestic stuff. But so often, most of what policing is just interacting with people. Sometimes they're not a problem. Sometimes they're asking for directions.
Yes.
Sometimes it's friendly. Sometimes it's less than friendly. But human interaction is core, essential, and a major component. And so I wanted to get your input about new ways of thinking about how we interact with the public, with the hope and belief that many of the lessons you've learned are actually transferable into the profession of policing.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, listen, we became number one in the world, not because of the excellence of our food or even of our service or design. We became number one because we made the choice to be as unreasonable in pursuit of how we were making people feel as every other restaurant on that list was in pursuit of the product they were selling those people.
Yeah.
And by the way, it might sound like a subtle difference, but it's a dramatic difference. The book is called Unreasonable Hospitality because, listen, no one becomes great at what they do without being a bit unreasonable in pursuit of it.
Yeah.
Right? Trying to bring as much creativity and intention to building the best product, whether that's, you know, a movie or a new technological innovation or your policing product.
So, I mean, the way I would equate that is like, you know, the statistics of policing may be great once a year when they're released, but
Yes.
our feeling about the police will be completely dictated by our interactions and our personal experiences with the police.
Yes.
So, believe it or not, you know, as much as I know there's at least one police chief that I know who keeps saying we need to improve the customer service of our agency. And he gets a lot of pushback, you know, because they don't think of themselves in customer service. But yet it says on the side of the police car to serve and protect. Serve and service is actually a core component of policing.
And by the way, you protect people by caring for them. And hospitality is about caring for people.
Yeah.
And so I think there's so much about, listen, like I'll stick in the restaurant metaphor just for a second because I think it's just a helpful building block for this. There's this Maya Angelou quote that we use all the time. People forget what you say, they'll forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. When I talk to people who dined at our restaurant when it was the best in the world, very rarely can people remember a single thing they ate. But they'll always remember the little things that we did to give them a sense of belonging, to make them feel seen. And by the way, that thing, the one that you remember, well, it works in both positive and negative ways, right? When there's a complete void of hospitality, that becomes the thing that they remember. And listen, for any organization charged with serving and protecting, there needs to be a certain level of trust, and trust is only based on the things that we remember, and that is all in the hospitality and far less in the product.
I know you love to collect stories of hospitality from around the world, and some of them are quite unusual, and a lot of them are outside of the hospitality industry per se, outside of a hotel or outside of a restaurant. Can you give an example outside of the traditional hospitality industry that you love? And then I have a follow-up question after you give that, just because I want to start getting the folks who are on this call to start thinking a little with a wider aperture. So give an example of hospitality outside of a hotel or a restaurant.
I mean, I'll talk about one that just happened about a week ago, which one of the things I think often about is how hospitality can be systemized if you simply do some simple pattern recognition, look for the recurring moments, those that happen over and over and over again. And by the way, everyone listening to this, I guarantee you could in 5 minutes name 6 of those, right? These things that just happen often. And if you can look for those, and then when you find them, decide in advance how your response can be as gracious as humanly possible. And then just bake that into the system such that that is always how you respond. I was on a plane we pulled off onto the runway, and that all too familiar, never exciting message to hear came over the intercom. Hey, folks, we've just discovered there's something wrong with the plane. We're going to be here on the runway for a while. We'll let you know when we know more. I fly often. I'm stuck, delayed on the runway with some frequency. And immediately you start to feel it in the plane, right? It's not like you're delayed before you get on the plane where people can start walking around the airport, go get a snack. You're stuck there. And all it takes is 2 or 3 people around you to start doing those gasps of exasperation before the energy on the plane starts going sideways. But this time, after the pilot announced that, he came out of the cockpit and walked up to the first family, parents with their kids, and said, hey, do you guys want to go see the cockpit? And the kids got up and they were all excited. He brought them into the cockpit. They took a look around. He brought them back to their seats, went to the next family, went to the third and final family. We're still delayed. And then he started offering that up to everyone else on the plane. This is what happened. Those that received a tour of the cockpit were elated. Everyone else on the plane was elated. He had, through this simple gesture, completely changed the environment, and rather than frustration, created like a spirit of fun and playfulness. When he was done, before he went back into the cockpit, I said, hey, how often do you do that? And he said, I do it every time. He said, I'm just up there waiting. It's not fun for me to wait. It's not fun for me to have a plane full of frustrated people. But every time I do that, it changes the vibe. That is such, in my view, a beautiful example of hospitality out in the world and done in a precise, thoughtful, and systemized way.
What I so appreciate about that, and I think, police have this view very often of the public, and the public have this view of the police very often, which is it's us and them, right? We look different, we act different, half are in uniform, half are not, right? Yes. And this idea that actually it's not true, and this is what this pilot recognized, it's not my crew and my passengers, it's us. It's we are stuck in a plane. And though our frustrations are different, and though we have different exercises of control and authority, there are different levels of authority. The captain can do whatever he wants, he can get up and walk around, you can't, right? The rules are different. He created the sense of togetherness. Ironically, my flight, I just took a long-haul flight from Europe back to the United States just 2 days ago, and I had the best announcement from a captain ever, and he went through this beautiful magic of the tyranny of borders, and we're going to fly you and all this stuff. But he got to the end, and he said, I need you to know that we are doing this together. He said, your fears are my fears, and your joy is our joy. And he recognized that this flight is good for his crew and for his passengers if we do it together.
Yes.
And I love this idea of thinking that we are operating in this community. And sometimes the law has to be enforced, but this is our community and we are doing this.
Yes.
Which I think is a very higher order thinking, but I think it is the key to better hospitality. And I think this is the other thing that people forget, which is extending good hospitality isn't just good customer service. It actually makes the job of the person doing it better.
Oh my gosh.
As exemplified by the captain. He got through the torture of waiting much easier and much more joyfully.
I mean, I also just believe that hospitality is a selfish pleasure. It feels good to make other people feel good, right? Like everyone who's ever exchanged gifts can relate to how much better it feels when you get someone else the perfect gift than when it does they get you the perfect gift, right? There's something chemical that happens when you bring someone else joy. And I mean, that guy could have just sat in the cockpit, just waiting for an announcement, which, by the way, sitting around and not being able to do anything never feels good.
Yeah.
While tension was building throughout the rest of the plane, or he could get involved and bring a little bit of joy to some people who probably deserve a little bit of joy.
Let's cut to the chase. Had you had an interaction with police at any point that through your lens of what they could have done, or maybe let's pay them a compliment what they did do, but I'm very curious, if you've had an interaction with the police that through your lens we can discern an opportunity.
So yeah, and I'm trepidatious here because in referencing authority, I'm going to tell two stories right now, both at the airport. Neither was TSA. They were the cops on the perimeter of the airport. So I don't know what actual entity.
Don't worry about it. We're, just so you know, their fears are our fears. Their joy is our joy.
But I'm going to tell a good story and a bad story, both of which happened very recently. I'll start with the bad one. And let's get right into it. I landed at an airport. My dad was picking me up from the airport. My dad is now well into his 70s. My dad survived pancreatic cancer. He's healthy physically, but like many people at his age, he gets more uncomfortable in like traffic, and airport pickup is a very stressful scenario for people generally. And so I'm wearing my AirPods and I'm leaving with the bag, and he's trying to communicate to me where he is. And he's not doing a good job, to the point where I walk across the street and then I walk back and then I walk back and then I walk back. So I crossed the street 4 times. The guy there kind of directing traffic, making sure that no cars are stopped for too long, sees this happen and starts to just get very frustrated with me that I'm going back and forth across the street too much and perhaps making it more difficult for traffic to go by, and it looks like I'm not paying attention or whatever. He walks up, grabs me by the shirt and pushes me across the street and says, "Hey, buddy, get your head out of your ass and stop crossing the street. Like, I'm trying to run something over here." That's one example.
Wow.
Now, a little bit of, outside perspective, I probably looked like some idiot who was like listening to music and just wandering back and forth across the street. My former boss and forever mentor, though, a guy named Danny Meyer, used to talk about this thing called the charitable assumption, where it's basically a fancy way of saying, like, give people the benefit of the doubt, ask the question before you say the thing, assume the best in people. That if in a restaurant someone comes in and they're acting like a jerk, we can decide that they don't deserve our best hospitality. But if you give them the charitable assumption, what you do is you say, maybe they're acting like a jerk because on their way to the restaurant tonight, they found out their mom died or their wife had just filed for divorce. Maybe the person acting like a jerk actually needs our best hospitality more than anyone else in the room. That guy was clearly having a bad day. He looked at me. He thought I was just some idiot that was like making his life more difficult, and he acted accordingly. When in reality, I was just scrambling, trying to make my aging father not feel lost in a sea of chaos. That's the bad version. Good version, different airport a week later. I'm just walking through. I walk into the airport with my wife and my 3-year-old daughter. And my daughter like kind of slips and falls. The cop comes over, helps my daughter up, and gives her a little police badge sticker. A small gesture, by the way, right? Did not take much time, much money. The guy clearly enjoyed doing it. And I've told that story about 150 times about how one person gave me a feeling of us versus them.
Mm-hmm.
Another person, different locations, same exact job, just did a little something that made my daughter feel a bit of joy, and by definition made me feel like he was on my side.
Yeah. You said something which I wrote down as you said it. I thought it was profound, which is when somebody thinks you're making my life more difficult. Why are you making this more difficult for me? And you sometimes hear that, people's interactions with the cop. I've been witness to them. If you just stop resisting, you'll make my life easier. You'll make my job easier.
Yes. Yes.
Which is the wrong attitude for hospitality. And there's a classic example that many on the call may have experienced or performed themselves of what good hospitality looks like in policing, and I'll share it with you, which is at the Curve, we believe that the purpose of police is to protect the vulnerable from harm, right? Now, let's say somebody did something naughty, shoplifted, whatever, right? And there's some sort of brief chase. In that case, the person is presumed to commit a crime, and the police are enforcing the law, and they chase them. The moment that person is caught and in handcuffs, they are now vulnerable. They're no longer a threat to themselves or anyone else. They're in custody, literally and figuratively, in the care of, that's what custody means, right? In the care of the police. And the question is good hospitality is that officers or that deputy's ability to now shift their mindset to, once they're in handcuffs, they are now vulnerable. And the number of times that they now treat them differently, and by the time they get to jail, that person says to the cop, "Thank you," because literally they were treated differently. Or
Yes.
my favorite one is, you pull somebody over and they've got expired tags or a warrant or whatever, and an arrest must be, by law, they have to make an arrest, right? And the cop, your charitable assumption, the cop thinks, look, this person's not having a good day, right? They just got caught for their warrant. I'm sure life hasn't been kind to them to get them to where they are right now, right? I have to tow their car because I can't leave it on the side of the freeway. And says to the person, "Hey, listen, I have to tow your car. Before I do you want to call a family member or a friend to come pick it up first, so you don't have to deal with the fees and the cost of getting your car back later, because obviously life is unkind in this moment." And again, that person is given the opportunity to call a friend. They wait half an hour, whatever, not a big deal. Somebody comes to get the car. Charitable assumptions are given. Tremendous charity is offered. Patience. And that person will say, "Thank you for the way they were treated," even though legally they have to be arrested. And even legally their car has to be removed from the freeway. And we'll say thank you to the police. And it's that kind of hospitality that diminishes the us and them, and it creates I understand you're doing your job, but I get that we're in this. Thank you for treating me with dignity. That's all it is.
I've gotten a few speeding tickets in my life, and and when I have, there's been times when I've said with profound sincerity, "Thank you."
Yeah.
And there's been times when I'm finally allowed to drive away, I say, "Fuck you."
Yeah.
And I think it's important because neither experience required more energy or time from the police officer.
It's funny, as we talk about this, I want to know what that cop is saying at the end of that as well. Is that cop filling out the final paperwork on their ticket going, that was nice, versus "fuck them"?
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
But by the way, energy
The difference
contagious.
being the police are in the position of authority.
Yes.
And by the way, I've done ride-alongs. It is astonishing to me how many people, their knee-jerk reaction is to be very aggressive to the authority figure. I've seen it. It is astonishing. So you can't always say the police set the thing in motion, but they can change, or at least not react to, like, "You're making my job more difficult," not react to the negative energy.
Well, I want to say I want to say three things. First of all, general disclaimer: we can only control our own actions, and we're here talking about one side of it, and so that's why some of the things I say I'm going to say. Two, energy is contagious, right? And what you put out is what you get back. And by the way, positive energy makes you feel better. Negative energy makes you feel worse, right? And so there is the selfish thing that comes back again. There's tons of research done that if you are consistently leading with generosity and kindness, you are more energized at the end of the day than you are if you choose the other path. But the third thing I want to say, I want to go back to those airport examples just before I move on too quickly from them, is I have to imagine if you're here watching this, it's because there is this better world that you want to see, right? Everyone's here because they envision a world that they want to collectively pursue. And like most dramatic change or lofty goals, it can sometimes feel unbelievably overwhelming and at times insurmountable. But I believe that the smallest actions can have unbelievably outsized impacts. How we react when someone is really defensive, when a police approaches them, it's probably as much to do with their last interaction they
Yeah.
had with the cop as it has to do with them as individuals.
Yeah.
I told those stories in chronological order. The one that happened where the guy like pushed me across the street happened before the other one. When the guy came up to hand my daughter that sticker, I was defensive when he walked up because the last interaction I had with the cop was the last one. The next time a cop approaches me, I will be warm and embracing because the last thing that happened was the guy giving my daughter a sticker. One single action can change someone's perception of an entity. And that has to be pretty empowering when you think about it.
Let's change tacks here for a second now. We've been talking about police and general public. But I've always believed that your customer will never love you until your employees love you first. Right? That the single easiest way to control and for the leaders in any policing agency to have control over how their cops, who are independent contractors when they're out by themselves, they're entrepreneurs when they're out in the field, right? It's usually one or two people out there by themselves. The easiest way to have control over that franchise operation is how you feel when you're at work, when you're back at station, back at headquarters, right? Can you please say a little more? So one of the reasons you were able to reinvent service at the restaurant and how we, your customers, felt started with how the corporate culture you built internally. When did you make that realization? When did you make that realization that you have to change the way you were leading internally to affect change externally?
I mean, I don't know when the realization happened, but the realization was this: the only scalable investment I could actually make was into the people that worked for me, not into the people that we were serving, not our customers.
All right, let's double click on that. Say that again, which is the only discernible scale you as the leader of the organization could affect was by changing the way that the people who worked for you felt.
Yes.
Not how you obsessed about one customer, one customer, one customer. The scalability was these however many people, a couple hundred people who work for you on a regular basis, get that lock solid, everything else ripples from there.
Yeah, I mean, I always look for the greatest levers, right? In any situation, where can I apply the least amount of energy and have it produce the greatest possible impact? And I could run around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to influence and engage and inspire all the customers. And at best, I might be able to touch 5% of them. Whereas I could touch 100% of my team over and over and over again, and then watch them go out and pay it forward and influence.
And which is 100% of your
customers. Yeah. Exactly. And by the way, by definition, we had at our peak 1,800 employees, but for a good chunk of time, it was a few hundred employees versus thousands and thousands and thousands of guests, right? I could spend a lot of time with those people. And if I was just as creative, just as intentional in how I invested in them as most other people were making the choice to be and how they were investing in their customers, the impact would be extraordinary.
Now, by the way, this is a real problem in policing today, which is morale. And in part because we're living in a time where police are at their lowest popularity because of events that we read in the news and the way in which many policing agencies are led, i.e. poorly. And then those negative experiences affect the general perception of an entire industry, of an entire profession. And I think few and far between, I hate to say this, but it's few and far between are the number of policing leaders that actually obsess with how do my cops feel when they leave to go home at the end of the day. Do they feel cared for? Do they feel seen? Do they feel heard? Do they feel that I am treating them with dignity and respect? Am I, as the leader, if the purpose of police is to protect the vulnerable from harm, my cops are the vulnerable ones emotionally, physically, but even do they feel like a part of a team? And unfortunately, in too many policing agencies, cops may like each other, but they don't trust each other. They may like their boss, but they don't trust their boss. And it very much makes the cops feel alone. And they may have one bud, you know? But there's very much a sense of alone and walls up, never admit weakness, never admit that you don't know something, never ask for help kind of thing, because it may affect your reputation, but also may affect your promotability or how your boss sees you. So what are the first steps? As you said, the people who have logged on here are all well-intentioned, are all here because they want to see this change in policing from the inside out. That's why they showed up here today. And a lot of them are early adopters are like, I need this, I want this. How do I even start?
Yeah. Yeah, and what I would say if the whole point is to be trustworthy, it's hard to be a trustworthy person in the world if you don't have people around you that you trust. I'm going to give like very tangible, specific things that I have done in my companies and that I've seen work dramatically well across industries. The first is the daily huddle. In the restaurant business, it's called pre-meal. Pre-meal is the 30-minute meeting we have with our entire team right before we open the doors and start serving our customers. Most restaurants do it. Unfortunately, most of them waste it. A pre-meal is wasted when you spend the entire time talking about things that could be easily communicated via an email, a new dish, a new wine by the glass, a new policy. That meeting is when the leader actually has an opportunity to stand up and lead, to share moments of inspiration from out in the world and to invite their team to do so in return, where you don't just talk about the what, but about the how and the why, where you talk about the things that will make the people who work with you not just better at their jobs, but better in their lives.
Give me an example. It's 30 minutes before the doors open. You're not talking about a new vacation policy. You're not talking about a new dish, which is very transferable to policing, which is here are the stuff that you need to know for the shift. Give me some specific examples of how that 30-minute was used.
I mean, it could be what I would talk about in that meeting. Some things were just things I experienced out in the world that I wanted to take home, and some things were part of the permanent collection. I'll give you one example from each. Something I experienced out in the world, what I just shared about those two experiences at the airport, the positive and the negative one, I would have brought that back. Yeah. And I would have spent time talking to the team about what exactly happened and what I learned from each example. And then as a team, we'd talk about how to bring that and make that a part of how we engage with our guests.
So a chief could actually say, hey, I heard these stories about how a cop treated somebody, a good version and a bad version. Let's talk about it, why it happened and how we can... Brilliant. Keep going.
It could be watching your TED Talk back in the day. I'm not pandering, but I'm serious. Like, you watch stuff. I believe if you walk through life with your eyes peeled, there are little nuggets of inspiration all around you always. And the leader's responsibility is to gather them, take them back to your crew, and use them to then inspire the team.
Yeah.
It could also, though, be parts of the permanent collection. I used to talk constantly about the nobility of service. No matter how much we just think that people around us understand the importance of their work, they need to be reminded of it. And in restaurants, you can easily just think, fuck, all I do is serve people dinner. But I would talk all the time about how, no, we might not be saving people's lives, but we can help people celebrate the most important moments of those lives, or give them a couple hours of grace to forget about their most difficult moments. And so anyway, every one of those meetings was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I would spend at least that much time preparing for every one of those meetings.
Yeah.
And I did 2 of them every single day. I ran a very busy restaurant that would become the #1 restaurant in the world. And I spent an hour every day, 30-minute meeting before lunch, 30-minute meeting before dinner. And I'd spend 30 minutes preparing for each of those 2 meetings.
Yeah.
That might seem unreasonable, but it was, in my view, the most powerful opportunity in front of me to actually inspire my team to be the best versions of themselves and to make them feel like they were a part of something bigger than themselves.
Love. I'm going to take some questions here from the audience. I had a comment, but I forgot it. It'll come back or it won't. Okay, I'll just go through these in order. John Oldham asks, on page 92 of your book, there are 11 words. Have those 11 words remained the same for EMP, or have they morphed over time to continuously improve the culture? Can you please tell us what the 11 words, what he's referring to for those who haven't read the book yet?
So similar to this idea of bringing home inspiration from out in the world, I've always believed that you can only get so good at something if you're only inspired by other people that do the same thing as you. The only way to change the conversation is to find inspiration from people who do different things. In one of the early reviews of the restaurant, there was a much better review than we deserved at the time, but at the end, the critics said, I just wish the restaurant had a bit more Miles Davis. And this was coming at a time where I was craving language to articulate our direction. And so I started researching everything I could find about Miles and came up with a list of the 11 words most commonly used to describe not his music, but the approach he took to making it. And on that list were words like endless reinvention, collaborative, fresh, vibrant, cool. And I felt such a connection to those words and how they could guide our decision-making that they were on a list in our kitchen from that point forward. A bit of a filter through which we made decisions. To answer the question directly, that list of words and our mission statement were two different things. Our mission statement was a directive way that made it very clear what we would do and what we wouldn't do. Those words were more of a philosophical, symbolic, inspirational thing for the entire team. The mission statement has changed a few times over the years. Those 11 words never did.
What I don't think you know this. I remember what I was going to say now. I don't think you know this, but my story is actually quite similar, which is when I really reinvented my career, the way business was being done, the way I did business, one profound change that I made is I canceled the subscriptions to all the trades from my own industry. What I realized is when I would read these, only one of two things would happen. I'd read about what somebody else did that I hadn't done, so I'd feel bad, or I would simply copy what other people were doing, which everybody was copying because we're all reading the same trades.
Yes.
Right? So either felt bad or was doing something uninnovative. And so I canceled the trades from my own industry, and I started reading more about what other people in other industries were doing, even though they had no relationship. I would read articles about manufacturing. I would read articles, I subscribe to more general business publications, and I would read articles that ordinarily I'd skip over because that's not my industry. And I realized in policing, all the consultants are ex-cops. All of the magazines are like policing today, and everybody's reading what everybody else is doing, and you can't have any innovation. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you here. Forward-thinking chiefs and sheriffs should be reading a book about hospitality from a restaurant industry. No, you're not in the restaurant industry, nor you're in the hospitality industry, but you are in the service industry. And if you got 5, 6, or 7 nuggets about how to treat your people, how to profoundly change a culture, this is innovation. And innovation doesn't mean thinking of it yourself. I think people misunderstand that. You don't have to be the innovator. You don't have to be the creator. Innovation is taking an idea that even if you have to tweak it, has application from there to here, and you're the one doing it. That's what makes you innovative and progressive and forward thinking.
Yes.
You reinvented a restaurant by copying the language of a jazz musician.
Yeah. Well, and let's just take that to a crazy place for a second. And this, some people are going to shake their heads at this. So, like, I have a newsletter called Pre-Meal where I basically write one of these every 2 weeks, and like what I would be talking about if I was still running that restaurant. And one of the ones I wrote about, which was an old one because I'd used it in the restaurant, was I got into an Uber X, and on the back, the back of the
The back of the
passenger seat
Yeah.
was a laminated sign that said, "Welcome to my Uber. I'm trying to make this the most hospitable Uber in the world. If there's any music you want to listen to, let me know. If there's a route you want to take, let me know. Also, I have bags of chips and cold bottles of water. If you're thirsty or hungry, just ask. I'm happy to give you one with my compliments." Never asked for 5 stars, by the way. Most of the laminated
Right.
signs on the back of an Uber just
Give me
say
5 stars.
5 stars. Yeah.
Yeah.
That could be an inspiring thing to talk about in a shift meeting at a police station.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the most ridiculous place it goes. What if after we arrest someone and we put them in the back of a car, would we offer them a cold bottle of water or a bag of chips? I don't know. Maybe not.
No. Hold on. I mean, again, it's a thought exercise, right? But what if there's a little laminated card on the cage? Because if you're sitting in the back of a car, it's not a good day.
Yeah.
You know? And so you can assume safely that the person in the back of the car, on balance, it's not. And what if it just says, if you're reading this, I get it. The day is not going according to plan.
Yeah.
But, like, we're in this together. I'm going to do my best to make this as easy for you as possible.
Yes.
Let me know if there's anything I can do to make it just a little bit easier. And if I can, I will.
Yes.
If it just had a little sign, and by the way, take my handcuffs off. Sorry, bud, I can't do that. But just reading that sign alone, the existence of the sign is a thing. Anyway, let me take some more questions. This is very interesting. Okay, Dustin Marvin. It can be challenging to present such positive and inspirational leadership-oriented subject matter to a team with a deeply entrenched distrust and low morale. The cynicism is difficult to cut through without trust. It can easily be written off as disingenuous. If it appears inauthentic, cops will see through it. They have to know you care about them first, otherwise none of this will land. Crawl, walk, run. Earn the trust first, create a safe briefing environment where real interaction can take place. It's the only place where people can get together and be their authentic selves without cameras rolling. Great point. And the point I think that Dustin's making that I think is extremely important, which is one pre-meal won't change your culture.
No.
And this is something that you commit to. And even if everybody thinks it's cheesy and corny, right? Talking about these things, at some point it'll start to click. And it'll be fast for some and slow for others. But it's like exercise. It's like you work out and you look in the mirror, you see nothing. You have to commit to it. And at some point it will start to click. But you have to commit to this stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, I want to say something to offer some clarity and then challenge one part of this. A pre-meal is not always like rah, positive, inspirational messages.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, listen, you can't trust someone who's always positive. No one's always positive. In order to lead humans, you need to allow yourself to be human. And that is when something is not going well, having the courage and confidence to stand up in front of your team and acknowledge it, to fully feel the weight of their disappointment and yours together. Sometimes it can just be saying, I am frustrated too. Because the moment someone hears that their leader is feeling the same feelings that they are, suddenly those feelings become a lot easier to feel.
Yeah.
Then sometimes, the leader's job is to say, all right, now get the fuck back up and let's get back to work.
Yeah.
But
you remind
Justin,
me.
I'm not trying to nitpick the language, but I just want to make sure the point is, otherwise none of this will land. Crawl, walk, run, earn their trust first. This meeting is part of the way you earn people's trust.
Yeah.
Because trust is earned through humanity, through consistency, through investment. And if every single day you show up and give all of yourself into this meeting, which, by the way, the coolest thing that's said here is this is the safest place.
Yeah.
And so if it is the safest place, you better make it really count, right? And make it the most, I still believe that pre-meal was the most important 30 minutes of the day in my restaurant. Yeah. If I did a good job there, the rest of the day would go that much better. And I'd imagine it could also be the case for all of you.
Okay, let me read another question. Jeremy Ashley. This may be kind of a silly question, but how do you frame unreasonable hospitality and policing to a senior administration who would be new to the idea? Can you give me tangible examples of how to do this, and how do you measure its success? So Jeremy obviously sounds like he's in the organization. How does he frame it up? You know, how do you go to a boss who may be open-minded-ish to be like, I've got it. Let's read a book about restauranting and how we can improve the culture in our in our police force.
I mean,
as opposed to the new issue of policing today.
I mean, it's hard. It's definitively hard to get people to change their perspective in a soundbite. I believe that what gets talked about is what gets thought about, and persistence and determination are important.
Yeah.
I think the best advice, like, I always like to start anytime I'm trying to change someone's behavior, like in small, palatable bites. Forward an article, share a TED talk, do this, do that, just start bringing something in. I found that when I come on too hot with any new idea, it's more quickly rejected, especially by those who have been entrenched in an idea for too long. And sometimes the best way to get someone on board with an idea is to incept it into them such that they ultimately believe it was theirs. That persistence and determination alone are omnipotent, right? The more you focus and talk about something, the more likely it becomes that someone will get on board with it.
There's two things in here that are really important, and I concur with you. One of the things that I have learned in bringing ideas up the chain of command when there's probably going to be resistance, because remember, they might be good people, but when you say we should be doing this, the assumption is you're not doing it, so you suck.
Yes.
Which is why people get defensive, right? But what I have learned is I bring an example, I bring a case, I don't bring an argument. And what I mean by that is instead of saying, hey, we should read this book, it seems like it could help us, versus you go read the book, talk about it with a couple of friends, try some things out in the field yourself, then go to your boss and say, hey, I read this book. There's this one thing I learned from this book. I did it. Can I tell you what happened?
Yes.
As opposed to, we should read this book. I think we could learn something. So you bring known versus unknown.
Start modeling the behavior.
Modeling the behavior. I have found that's very much more useful. It still meets your bite-size chunks criterion, but it's done, well, I tested it on myself and I'm giving you a real thing that I did, not some philosophical thing that might work. Because then you could say, no, that won't work, as you can't argue with what already happened. So I find that giving something that is literally difficult to argue against or impossible to argue against, because ideas we can argue against easily, just dismiss them. Tim Sharples asks, for those folks who may shy away from the term hospitality, what would Simon and Will see as a correct correlation between good customer service and effective procedural justice within policing? So the customer service term, or the term hospitality, rightfully so, just turns people off, or they feel like it's too mushy or not policey enough. What other terms can we help people use? I think how do we serve each other? How do we serve the public? We could serve the public differently. We could serve each other differently. I think, by the way, I do promote change. If your language doesn't work, Will, change Will's language. The language is secondary.
I mean, I want to say two things. One, I really do. I'm drawn to the idea of not how we serve people. Because, by the way, I always talk about the hospitality and service. Too many people conflate those two words as being the same thing. Service is the thing you do. Hospitality is how you make people feel when you do that thing. And so, like, just, yes, how we're serving people, but how are we caring for people? Like you said, the purpose of this organization is,
do people feel cared for?
Do people feel cared for?
And by the way, we're not talking about the general public. We're talking about each other. Do our cops feel cared for by our cops? Do our cops feel cared for by our leaders?
Because, by the way, and listen, I see all this stuff on Instagram with how there are some people out there that are just the worst with good cops. They're bringing terrible energy to good cops, and that is unbelievably heartbreaking. But the more people feel cared for, the more they will turn around and make you feel cared for in return. That's like,
here's a safety mechanism for cops, because I mean, I cannot imagine being on the receiving end of some of the way that people talk to cops. And the question is, you know, and we always tell cops, well, you kind of escalate. It must be very difficult to be yelled at, spat on, all of the things, right? People saying horrible things, personal things, attacking you, making references to your mother, your children, you know? Here's a technique that has worked for me that I think could work. I had it was with a girlfriend, and we were having I don't think it was a fight, but she sort of needed to talk to me about something. And the stuff that she said was very triggering for me. Some of it was untrue. And I started to feel my blood temperature rise, and my instinct was to defend myself. I tried not to attack, but at least defend myself. But I could feel myself getting very angry and annoyed and pissed off that she was attacking me personally, but also saying stuff that was stupid and wrong. And what I did was, it surprised me in the moment, I have to even say, which is I literally said to myself, this is their story. This is her story. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's her story. Your only job is to sit here and listen to her story. It's not about you. It doesn't matter if it's true or false. Just let her tell her story. And I sat there, didn't get triggered, remained quite calm, and listened to her story, even if I thought her story was fantasy. And at the end, she got it all out, and she's like, oh, thank you. And then actually backtracked some of her own thoughts, and I didn't say a word. Whereas if I interrupted, I would have escalated. If I corrected, I would have escalated. Anyway, Amy Perez asked
wait, can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
About what is another word to use instead of hospitality? And this was not in the comment. You use this language. If it feels too mushy for the police.
Yeah.
We should not avoid using a word because it feels more mushy than how we want to be perceived. In fact, if the word hospitality feels too mushy, it might be exactly the word that you need to start using.
Interesting. Very interesting. Like the cop I know who kept talking obsessively about customer service, as police need to up their customer service. And he had detractors, but he started to gain a bit of people understood what he meant.
Yeah.
Amy Perez asks a very specific question, and unfortunately one that plagues many police agencies. And I think you're getting a sense of how it is in real life, Will. How can leaders use shift meetings to help in building team cohesion and morale, especially when morale is low and we are short-staffed every day and officers are tired and burnt out?
I mean, okay, this is kind of a lengthy answer that's going to bring about another point I want to make, and then it's going to back into my answer to this one. We're talking about, you said, what are specific actionable things that can be done to make the people we lead feel cared for such that they can
when in reality they're stretched thin, morale is low, they're burnt out, they're beaten down.
And
so it's not perception. They actually are legit exhausted.
So listen, I believe, and I'm going to talk about the shift meetings in a second. I believe having these daily huddles is one of them. I believe creating a culture where feedback is normalized is one of the other biggest things that a leader can do to improve morale in their team. And this is counterintuitive to some. And when I'm talking about feedback, I'm talking about praise, obviously. About taking the time to acknowledge the many times when someone around you does something extraordinarily well, because people crave affirmation, even the ones that pretend to be too cool that they don't need it anymore. People love to be praised. But I'm also talking about criticism, Because if praise is affirmation, criticism is investment. And at the end of the day, most people want to feel like someone above them is taking the time to invest in them.
If praise is affirmation, criticism is investment.
Yes.
Not correction, investment.
Investment. Yes.
Great.
Criticism is an uncomfortable thing to give, and it's an uncomfortable thing to receive. And because of that, gosh, what a cool thing when someone is willing to step outside of their comfort zone for long enough to invest in you by showing you how you can be better. And so I believe the most high functioning organizations that also have the best morale are generally ones where feedback is the norm. And when I say it's the norm, I mean, it's not only well received, but it's sought out. Now, to be clear, you don't just start like acting like you have a culture of feedback. You set people's expectations. And generally what I advise companies to do is in those daily huddles for a month, say, we're going to start spending a lot more time on feedback and then rolling it out such that it doesn't happen to people, it happens for them.
Doesn't happen to people, it happens for them. So
yes.
Again, that's pre-service.
And so when morale is down, like, let's just forget about a team. Let's forget about an organization. Let's just think about ourselves as people, because people are people, whether they're at work or in life. Like, okay, you either need to feel heard, you either need to be celebrated, you either need to be inspired, right? There's these things that we do, we want other people to do for us when we feel down. Those are the things that you turn around and do for others. And so we already talked about when things really suck, a leader just naming how hard they are is one of the quickest ways to improve morale.
Without offering any kind of like bucket up, we can do just name it and leave it.
Just name it. Sometimes naming something is enough to just pop the balloon of crazy tense, vibes. There's nothing worse than when things are really bad without offering any idea on how to make them better. A leader just tries to give you like a cheerleading speech.
You're touching on something that's, I think, very important, and I think it's a very common mistake leaders make, which is they think they always have to be positive, or when something's bad, they think they have to fix everything. And I'll just take our friendship, right? You and I have both been on the receiving end of each other's friendship, where something bad is going on. We're not in good place. Morale, everything that we're describing about these cops, we've all, as every individual has been there. And you and I have gotten on the phone with each other and we said, whew, yeah, that sucks.
Yeah,
man, that sucks. And that's it. You'll get over this, bud. Don't worry. Think about all the good things going on in your life. You got such a great family. Just let it be. And I think for somebody and it doesn't even have to be a position of leadership. It can be anybody who says, hey, look, I know we're short-staffed and I know you guys have been running ragged. And I just want you to know, I hear that and I know, I don't have a solution yet. I just want you to know I know.
Yeah.
And I know it sucks and I just want you to know I know.
So that's one thing. Second thing is, gosh, when you're down, it just feels good to be inspired. Like, okay, what is the most famous version of a daily huddle? It's the locker room speeches that we see in movies all the time when the team is down at the half, right? And anyone who's ever seen Al Pacino's speech in the movie Any Given Sunday, like, you don't even need to be the person that steps up and says, I am now going to inspire you. You can be the person that says, guys, I've been feeling pretty down recently. And I read this article and I thought it was pretty inspiring. And it helped me, and I want to share it with you.
Yeah, but it goes back to what we were saying before, which is don't give me the idea of what we should do. Tell me the thing that you actually do. Is like, hey, if we read articles, that'll make us feel better.
Yes.
It says, I read an article. It made me feel better. I'm going to share this article with you.
Yes. Or the third, which is why I brought up the whole idea of creating a culture of normalized feedback. Okay, when you're offering criticism, there's rules. You criticize in private, you criticize without emotion, you criticize the behavior, not the person. But with praise, all bets are off. You praise in public. And I don't care how challenging a season an organization is in, there's always someone who's doing something well that deserves to be celebrated. And in that daily meeting, just celebrating the heck out of someone, going around the room being like, guys, this has been a really hard week for X, Y, and Z, but Simon, you did this and it was amazing. Everyone give Simon a round of applause. Pat, you did this. It was amazing. Like, the impact that can have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's oxytocin starts flowing and all of a sudden, like, morale is on its way to a really good place, if only for a little bit. But in a season where morale is consistently bad, just shining a few glimmers of positive morale into it can have a pretty asymmetrical impact.
I want to talk just very briefly how somebody shares that they're in a bad place as a way of leading other people to be open. Because if somebody has the courage, it's more efficient when it's the person in a position of leadership, but it doesn't have to be that person. But when somebody needs to share that they're in a bad place, or that they don't know something, or they don't understand something, it creates a space for other people to do the same. So, for example, everybody's afraid of telling when they made a mistake or don't understand something for fear of looking weak. And that term vulnerable scares the heck out of people, like be vulnerable at work, right? But you can be vulnerable with confidence. I'll give you an example. Like, hey, something really bad happened yesterday and I realized I am just not equipped for this. Like, don't do that. Don't, you know? But if you say, hey, something really bad happened yesterday and I realized I am not equipped for that situation and I need more training. Let me tell you what happened, right? You say the vulnerable thing with confidence, you own it, and it creates an environment which other people are more likely to then share the things that they need to share. Mistakes, gaps in training, requests for help, struggling at home, whatever it is, that if we do the same, I have a friend who's a phenomenal leader, and he'll do this and be like, hey guys, just need you to know, got some shit going on at home, some issues with my son. Yeah, it's annoying, but it's affecting me at work. I'm a little bit off my game. Just wanted everybody to know that it's happening. Okay. He said it with such confidence.
Well, yeah. And by the way, listen, I've apologized to people that work for me so many times. I've made big strategic decisions for the restaurant that did not work out. And rather than pretend I didn't make them, which is what most leaders do, I'll stand up in front of the entire team and say, I made that decision. I am sorry. We're going to get back on track. I've also gone up to many individuals who, in the heat of service, I will be giving them criticism, and I'll do it in a way that, with a bit of reflection later that night, I am not proud of. And the next day I walk in and apologize to them, not for the message I was delivering, but for the way in which I delivered it. And every time I've ever apologized to the people that work for me, two things happen. One, they trust me more. And two, the fact that I'm willing to effectively criticize myself makes them that much more willing to receive criticism from me.
Yep. One comment, and then I'm going to get back to the questions. One lesson I learned through a friend of mine, which is never give feedback in the middle of the situation. Give feedback at the end of the situation. So unless it's something legal or something bad's really going to happen, that's different. But in the middle of the situation, hey, next time don't do it this way. Next time do it this way.
Yes.
No. Wait till the very end and be like, hey, saw what happened today. Next time, think about this.
Yeah. Super unemotional. You're not criticizing them, just the behavior.
But also in the middle, people can't hear it.
Yeah.
And it'll shut things down. Okay, Chris Barisi, sorry, Chris. I like that charitable assumption. Can you explain how one's ego affects their level of service? Very interesting question. Over the years of supervising officers, I've often coached officers to avoid needing to be right to prove that your point when making enforcement contacts. People rarely admit their wrongdoing or do so without an excuse. Allow people to save face by taking their excuse with charitable assumption and going forward from there. That's very interesting. That recognizing that somebody's insecure, doesn't want to admit a mistake, and giving them charitable assumption as well.
Yes.
Just talk about the role in your experience that ego can play.
I mean,
in the application of service and the giving of service.
So, listen, I recognize that the metaphors at a certain point fall flat given the disparity of our worlds. And so I'm not saying any of these without any level of awareness or sensitivity, but I'm going to keep going. One of the things we would say all the time was being right is irrelevant. Because it's not just someone's ego. It's, well, I'll share like a very specific story I write about this in the book. I witnessed this in the restaurant one time. We were on our way to getting 4 stars in the New York Times. We were trying to be one of the best restaurants in America, which meant we needed to be as close to perfect as possible. We could not be seen as making mistakes. Otherwise, we would not get 4 stars. And I saw one of the guests ordered a steak medium rare. Now, the reality is that medium rare, a true medium rare, looks to some people like it's rare, right? A lot of America doesn't understand that medium rare is actually less cooked than they think it is. So they ordered it. We made it a perfect medium rare. We served it. The guy cut it open, called over the server and said, "Hey, I asked this for medium rare. This is rare." Now, the server, not wanting the guest to think we made a mistake, made a bigger mistake. He said, "Actually, sir, that is medium rare. You're wrong. But if you want it medium, I'd be happy to take it into the kitchen and make it medium for you." There's nothing bad about that reaction from a certain perspective. He didn't want the guy to make him, he wanted to make sure the guy got exactly what he wanted, and he said it all in a very gracious way. But in trying to make sure that the guest didn't think we'd made a mistake, he made a bigger mistake, which is he shamed that guy in front of the entire table of people he was with. And that guest left probably thinking we were a bunch of snooty whatevers. All you need to focus on, and this is what we transition to, is what our core value was. Our ultimate mission was to serve people the most delicious food with the most gracious service and have them leave really happy. If that happened, I didn't care how many mistakes they thought we made, or whether they thought we were right about some things or wrong about some things. And so as long as you are focused and convicted in what you were trying to achieve, achieving that is the only thing that matters. And whether people think you were right or wrong or made a mistake, even if you didn't, is completely irrelevant.
Yeah. I've always lived my life with, you can be right or you can make progress.
Yeah.
I can be right or I can make progress. I can't always be both.
And the moment you start caring too much about whether people think you are right or wrong, as opposed to knowing yourself whether you are or not, is the moment you start giving way too much of your power away.
I want to sort of tackle this ego thing just a little more. The word ego, I think, is a difficult word to unwrap, because ego is important. It's a positive thing, but it's also an insidious thing. I like the term confidence. And I think the more confident someone feels, the more comfortable they are being wrong.
Yes.
The more confident somebody is, the more comfortable they are giving somebody else credit, trying out something, acknowledging mistakes. I think
it takes a ton of confidence to stand up in front of a group and say, "I made a big mistake," or "I was wrong," because you're confident in your own skill set that you're not worried that people are going to respect you less for it.
And I don't think it's our job to, quote unquote, build up someone's ego, but I do think it's our job to help somebody build up their confidence.
And that comes from celebrating.
And sometimes that's rank and file or middle management helping me build the confidence of the person above them. Because if the person above me is insecure, we're all screwed. But if I help build their confidence, they're more likely to be a better leader.
Yeah, and I believe you can help grow someone's confidence through celebrating them, through making it okay for them to fail every once in a while, through creating a safe environment around them.
Let me read a question here by Kevin Jensen. On the internal side of improving public safety /service, do you believe that both influencing existing staff toward higher order values and hiring those with a better balance of character and empathy and traditional qualifications are equally important? So hiring and training, not just hiring. So what I like this idea of higher order values. So just talk about values and how you hire and train to values.
Well, it sounds like do you try to retrain the people you have, or just move on from them and hire a bunch of new people? That's kind of what I heard in that question.
Well, no, I think it's talking to like how important are higher order values when hiring and training, as opposed to the values of, how good is your resume, in the policing world, like how fast can you drive, how good a shot are you good at affecting an arrest. Higher order values of empathy, respect, curiosity over judgment.
Gosh, I mean, listen, when I was coming up in my career, one of the biggest pieces of advice I was constantly given is you hire for hospitality, you train for excellence. As in to say, people are either hospitable or they're not. Hire the ones that are, and then train them how to do the job well. In one sense, that reinforces this idea that I believe deeply in, which is, as a leader, it's our job to articulate as clearly as humanly possible what we stand for, what are our core values, our non-negotiables, and where we're going, and then invite people to either join us on that ride or get off the train.
Yeah.
In the other sense, I disagree with this side, with the advice I was given, because I don't believe people are either hospitable or they are not.
Yeah.
I believe everyone has hospitality in them. Those that aren't hospitable just haven't had a leader in their lives to help draw it out of them. And so, yes, I believe the higher core values, those moral things that we stand for, need to be at the center of everything we do. But just because someone is not embodying those ideas from day one doesn't mean they're not in there. It just might mean that someone hasn't come along and inspired those things out of them.
I've seen people, especially when they come from other jobs and they've been beaten up so many times, that they are very cynical, and sometimes they're the last to come over. But you can't force anybody to come, and you can't force them to come at your timing. And so I've seen cultural transformations happen in organizations, and when people aren't joining, they go, it's okay, they'll come in their time. But that we're still continuing with them or without them, and we want them to join, but they'll come in their own time. In other words, they don't shame people for not jumping on board immediately, because everybody has their own baggage, right? And they may have a good reason to be cynical. The other thing is, when companies and organizations articulate their values, I think the big mistake they make when they articulate them is, one, they put values on the wall that are, dare I say, culturally trendy. And we go through phases where everybody's adding whatever values to their list of things, and I'll give you a very current one, which is everybody believes in diversity inclusion and literally added it to their values, and yet so many diversity and inclusion efforts failed. Do you know why? Because they didn't actually believe in diversity and inclusion in the first place. That's why.
Yes.
Right? They put it on the wall because the public said you have to have it on the wall, but they didn't actually believe in it.
Yes.
Right? So don't put shit on the wall if you don't believe in it, number one. Number two, it's not a list of aspirations. It's not who you wish you could be, right? Because you're going to fail every day, right? Values are who we are when we're operating at our natural best. And by the way, we're not always operating at our natural best. Our values are not always showing up. But we know that on the best days, when all cylinders are flying and people are getting along and it's working, you will see these things show up every single time. Write those on the wall, because those are the things that show us who you are at our natural best, and we want to strive for that. Don't make it aspirational.
Well, it's hard to stand for something. And so you better not tell people that you stand for something unless you're ready to put in the work and actually stand for it.
And we only know if you stand for something if you're willing to make a short-term decision to your own detriment to keep that thing alive.
Yes.
Like companies say they care about people, and yet you keep shitting on people to save money. I don't know how much you care about people, right? So don't say things. If I am going to judge, CVS said we care about the health of our customers, they stopped selling cigarettes. They literally took money off the bottom line, right? So don't tell me something, because I'm going to judge you by your behavior.
Yes.
Talk is cheap. And I need to see that actions and words align, and then you're going to build trust. We have about 10 minutes left. We can always end a couple minutes early if we want to. I'm just reading. A lot of these are comments and good comments. Thank you very much, everyone. Why don't I just do this? Any closing thoughts? Keep in mind that the people on this call, oh, there's one question. Hold on. Click the Q&A. Tara Wiles. I know change in culture takes time, especially in policing, when the public's perception of police is so damaged. How do we fight the urge to point out everything we're doing right as a way to convince the public that we're not all bad? Some bad apples have really hurt us as the whole. And Tara is right. I'm tired of cops saying it's just a few bad apples, when the full expression is a few bad apples spoil the whole barrel. That is the full expression. So it is true. I'm tired of, I feel, Tara, which is stop keep telling me about all the good cops. It doesn't offset the emotion that people to have towards police. It's an emotion, and you can't fix emotions or change emotions with facts. 9 out of 10 cops are good cops. Changes my emotions and my feelings 0. You can't convince someone to change the way they feel. So do you want to react?
I mean, listen, relationships are relationships, and many of the lessons we learn from those in life can be applied to those in work. When my wife is having a conversation with me about X, Y, or Z that I am not doing well in our marriage, if my response is to me to say, right, A, B, C, D, E, and F, G, I'm doing really well, right?
Right.
That 100% of the time will
Oh,
fit.
that's so good.
Sometimes, and by the way, it goes right back to the thing we were saying before. Sometimes it's just about meeting her there and acknowledging it and saying, you're right. You're 100% right. Now, that's the lesson from the relationship that can be brought into it. Now, there's also a PR side of this. And so I would just put those two things together. You are right. We are not doing as good a job as we need to do at that.
Yes.
Now, I do want to say, it's not just me up here. I'm representing a large group of people that give so much of themselves to serve and protect this country every single day. And it just wouldn't feel right for me to leave this conversation without acknowledging some of the good stuff that's happening.
Yes. And people, I think, forget that when those cops are standing in press conferences, when those chiefs, very often they're trying to talk to the internal audience, but they're doing it for the press conference.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way. Talk to the internal audience internally. And then, as you said, I can acknowledge but separating the two, which is, look, what you saw on television is embarrassing. I'm ashamed. I'm disgusted that somebody wears my uniform and acts like that. And at the end of the day, we as a profession must do better and have to do better. You're seeing the result of many, many years of poor leadership, and this is how it shows up. It's going to take us many years to get back, and we are trying. And at the same time as saying that, I have to acknowledge the number of people that are trying and are doing better.
Yes.
You're absolutely right to separate the two.
But say both things.
Do you want to give us some closing words? You've probably learned a little bit here as well about the challenges that
I would love to spend
wonderful men and women are facing. Yeah. How do we help them, Will? Do you want to give some closing remarks?
I mean, I want to acknowledge something. We're talking about charitable assumption and being right is irrelevant. And at the end of the day, when I would sit down with my team, we'd say their perception is our reality, being right is irrelevant. We're here to serve, But there was always a line, right? If the customer ever became abusive, we had the ability to kick them out. I know that you don't. And I just want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that, a lot of the stuff we're talking about, there's this added complication. And I just want to say, I know that's incredibly hard. And I also want to say thank you, because we are living in a culture where people are much more inclined to be super verbose about the things that they want to complain about than they are the things they want to celebrate.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people like me who you don't hear from who are incredibly appreciative of the work you are all doing, and especially this group that has, well, enough vulnerability to recognize that it can be done even better.
Yeah.
And we are in very, very different industries, but at the end of the day, we are in the business of serving other people.
Yeah.
And so I'm just encouraging you that the next time you find yourself pursuing a relationship, by the way, I'm using those words with great intention because I believe that is one of the best definitions of hospitality. Hospitality is about being creative and intentional in pursuit of relationships with the people you work with and the people you serve. To try being just a little bit more unreasonable, to give people that sense of belonging, to make them feel seen and cared for, even to give them a little memory that can last a lifetime, perhaps just a little moment of joy in a pretty terrible season. It will transform the industry.
Yeah.
But as importantly, it'll make you and all the people that work with or for you feel really freaking good.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And Bruce asked a question right at the end, which I think is a perfect coda for this event, which is how does someone who's not at the top of the food chain implement these principles if the power brokers do not share the vision? And we cannot control other people. We can only control ourselves. And Bruce, though it's less efficient to have ripples inside the organization when we are not in the position of leadership, every single one of us can show up every day to choose to be the leaders we wish we had. And everything Will just said, we can do for the people to the left of us, to the right of us. And though we may not be able to affect the whole organization, we can affect the lows of the lives of the people we interact with, both the people with whom we work and the people with whom we will interact in the general population. And if for no other reason, because it's good for them, but it's also good for us.
Well said.
Thank you, everyone, for showing up. We recognize that this is a lot of time to take out of your day, your busy days. We appreciate it. We will chop up the recording and put out some of the best, most salient bits for consumption. If you want to stay in touch, please do. I'm sure somebody's already posted a thing in there. Thecurve.org if you'd like to learn more about the Curve and some of our views on the world. But we will change policing from the inside out. And it's because of all the people who showed up today that gives me confidence to know that we will. Thank you very, very much, everyone, for being a part of it. Thank you, those from the Curve who helped organize it. And most importantly, Will, thank you for giving your time, your energy, your magic to once again serve people well outside your industry. But the things you talk about are entirely applicable. The author of Unreasonable Hospitality, do check it out. It's an incredible book. I know it has application in policing. And until the next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other.
Thanks, guys.